All right, hello world. We are Sustain Rural Wisconsin Network, the coalition of grassroots groups throughout Wisconsin that are dealing with CAFO issues, concentrated animal feeding operation issues in our communities. And today we have a selection of the comments that were submitted on the Kinnard dairy CAFO permit in Kewaunee County, where they've been having a massive regulatory failure and drinking water crisis for a number of years now. And yet the DNR is most likely planning to permit this operation. And not only that, but set an animal unit cap of over 20,000 animal units, which would be unprecedented in the state. And some of us believe that that would be irresponsible in an area like Kewaunee County, where they've been having so many issues for so long. And we're really looking forward to some proactive solutions to be dealing with this important issue in our communities. So thank you for listening in, and we will now launch into some of the comments that we'd like the public to hear, and we'd like to get out farther than just regulatory hearings with the Department of Natural Resources. All right, Donna, it's all you.
Hi, I'm Donna Swanson. I live in Grant County. That's in far southwestern Wisconsin. The proposed modifications to this WPDES permit are concerning to me as a citizen of Wisconsin, even though I don't reside in the area of this CAFO. The precedent set by the proposed modification would be not only alarming for those of us living near a CAFO in the rest of the state, but would also appear to be in direct opposition to the intent and purpose of the Supreme Court's decision from this past year, which affirmed the DNR's authority to limit animal units. The DNR is charged with protecting the state's natural resources, one of which is our ground and surface waters. The concentration of dairy animals in Kewaunee County and the accompanying manure has contaminated the water. Allowing Kinnard farms or any other CAFO in the area to double their animal units will only exacerbate the situation. This would not appear to be in keeping with the department's responsibilities or the court's intent. The court's decision also provided for the use of monitoring wells to be utilized at the location of manure spreading to determine when and where contamination occurred. This tool should be used to protect the groundwater for all residents of the area. The CAFO owner, whose actions the rules are intended to regulate, should not be making the decisions of number or location of these monitoring wells. I oppose the modification as proposed and ask that the Department of Natural Resources use the authority that they have to limit any expansion of the Kinnard Farms WPDES permit to the extent that available land spreading will not further contaminate ground or surface waters in the area. Monitoring wells be placed in numbers and locations that can reasonably evaluate the situation. Thank you.
I'm Edie Ehlert of Crawford County in southwest Wisconsin. Groundwater is owned by the people of Wisconsin, with the DNR entrusted to protect our water. In short, the Kinnard draft permit allows too much manure on too little land already saturated with liquid manure. Many of the wells in that area are contaminated, with neighboring residents paying the costs in diminished health and quality of life. Living in the southwest part of the state with karst geology below the soils, much like the situation in east and northeast Wisconsin, we recognize just how vulnerable our water is to pollution. In rural Wisconsin, liquid manure is one of the major sources of groundwater and surface water pollution. DNR, please revisit this permit and look at the spreading capacity of the land, not the size of the lagoons. Thank you.
I'm Elaine Swanson. Dick, I write from I speak from rural Pickett, where our family has lived for over 30 years, working to establish a wildlife sanctuary. This land is located in the town of Rosendale, 2 miles from the operation known as Rosendale Dairy. In July of this past year, Severin and I were overjoyed to learn the Wisconsin Supreme Court had officially confirmed the DNR's authority to protect our water from pollution caused by industrial farming. In particular, action could now move forward on improved modifications to the permit for Kinnard farms. More good news. We learned DNR is now required to revisit wastewater permits for other factory farms. Was it possible the agency was about to demonstrate the beginning of a return to strongly advocating for the environment? Alas, a few months later, we were astounded to learn that instead of rendering Kinnard farms an example of greater health protections being written into their permit, the agency is considering Kinnard's application to expand this operation. Sadly, for good reason, the DNR has lost the public trust. We've seen your many failures to protect our health and safety. And now you have been given the power from the highest court in the state, power to be assertive and proactive in the face of an approaching crisis, that being widespread contamination of our groundwater. You have all the scientific data on the bacteria and nitrate levels, which already exceed state standards in Kewaunee County. Water degradation, in fact. Judge Jeffrey Bolt exposed severe sufficiencies in past permitting. Rural communities have long been aware that permits increasingly rely on self-regulation. Enforcement of any violations is often only when people have gathered and documented the evidence. Judge Bolt saw all this and said, the proliferation of contaminated wells represents a massive regulatory failure to protect groundwater. Please recognize that there is a growing number of people who live on land they cherish. More citizens choosing to buy their food and organic farmers from organic farmers who show reverence and respect for their land and for their livestock. For record, I would like to request and urge the DNR to provide the people with a full environmental impact statement as part of the state's review of this Kinnard farm expansion proposal. After all, this operation, if allowed to increase its herd to nearly twice its current size, would likely become the largest CAFO in the state of Wisconsin. Further, the farm would be in operation on one of the most contaminated, violated soils in the state. It's a daunting challenge, Mr. Dix, to face the industry that has profit at the forefront, plus the financial power to enforce its will, and to nevertheless choose ethical and moral responsibility. It looks like our fate will be determined by the personal integrity of a few within the state agency. These see the faces of the future. I urge you to prevent further irreversible harm to the Earth's finite resources and the people who call Wisconsin home. Deny this permit for expansion. Thank you.
And I'm Kim Dupre. I lived and worked in St. Croix County, west side of Wisconsin, for 20 years. And the majority of that time was 1.5 miles from an industrial dairy. So I have firsthand experience of what it's like to live in the vicinity. And as I reviewed this Kinnard permit, I found a lot of incongruity in the documentation when they talked about all the existing water quality problems in the vicinity of this Kinnard operation, but yet the permit turns around and doubles the size of the farm, especially when the studies have shown that much of that contamination could be traced back to cow manure. And the fact sheet that the DNR put out acknowledged that up to 50% of the wells in the area have been polluted with nitrates above 20 parts per million. and extensive bacterial contamination. In fact, the researchers referred to it as a fecal soup or a third world country. And I just don't understand logic in expanding this facility. I mean, to me, insanity is defined by doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So whatever plan practices have been done in this area obviously are not working. And the actions to change course need to be implemented now. Because the plight of these residents really resonates with me since I lived in Emerald Township for 20 years. We in Emerald also had several instances of E. coli contaminated wells, nitrate contaminated wells. In fact, our town hall there in the center of the county was built in 2007, had nitrates at 6.9 at the time, which is below the 10 parts per million that health recommends. But yet their reading in December of 2021, just 3 months ago, came back at 47.9 per million for nitrate contamination. And that happened in 15 years. Why there hasn't been a level of interest in finding a source of this or investigating this by DNR like they have in Kewaunee County, I can only speculate. But unfortunately, the looks of this permit doesn't give me a whole lot of hope. The DNR prioritizes public health and safety. Actions speak louder than words. I mean, if this level of contamination was in a municipal water system, it'd be on fire time. There would be all kinds of notices and all kinds of brouhaha and media releases and all kinds of things going on. Yet groundwater is the drinking water system for rural Wisconsin. Both sources demand attention, protection, and especially when contamination is this widespread. So I view if the DNR doesn't stand for public health here in Kewaunee County, where will they make their stand? This has been one of the most studied areas in the state. Is any hope for oversight or accountability in Emerald or in the St. Croix River watershed where I live now, the shared border between Wisconsin and Minnesota, or the Mississippi River watershed, which is also shared with other states? I just have a hard time understanding how anyone could claim a moral high ground in feeding the world when you obviously are seeing so much contamination in their community in the process of feeding the world. So I have to ask the DNR, are they planning for the producer's next business balance sheet? Or are they planning for the next generation of citizens and their use of natural resources? Now, I grew up on a hog farm. My grandparents were dairy farmers. My other grandparents were poultry farmers. And I see the value of manure for soil health. But I also know the value of clean water for humans, for pets, for livestock. And I get that farming has changed, but what has not, nor will ever change, is our need for clean drinking water. So thus I'm urging the DNR to right their ship. First and foremost, make health and safety of all citizens the first priority, and then build a healthy rural economy around that. Please stand
I
in
am
the
just
gap
looking
for
at
us citizens.
what a new bill being proposed. It just more, it looks like more lip service and more planning by an interference with big feed and seed companies, and it's just, they seem to be ruling what's going on with our water, and it's frustrating. I don't know if they have children or grandchildren to worry about, but I sure do. And I think, like I always say, my faucets say hot and cold. They don't say Republican or Democrat. This is for everybody. So it's got this cleared up so the future will be safe for all of us. Thank you.
All right, well, my name is Forrest Yankee. here in Crawford County in southwest Wisconsin. I consider myself a farmer as well. I raise pigs, and I'm the program coordinator for Crawford Stewardship Project, as well as the current board president for Sustained Rural Wisconsin Network. And the comments that I submitted on this front is that Kinnard Farms is already larger than it was when groundwater in the area was so contaminated that a massive regulatory failure was declared in 2014. Groundwater issues are far from resolved in the area, so it appears gravely irresponsible to allow them to nearly double the size of their operation if they so choose, as long as they can prove that their manure lagoons can handle the volume. How did local groundwater quality, for which we have much better information than almost anywhere else in the state in Kewaunee County, and drinking water goals impact the DNR's animal unit cap? These should have been the primary considerations, as the DNR is the body entrusted to keep our water safe, clean, and abundant. All animal unit caps should be primarily based on water quality and quantity considerations, not a farm's capacity to store and spread manure. Unless and until this is the case, any animal unit cap is simply an arbitrary number. We were pleased to see that groundwater monitoring will be required for more than just the production facility, and this is an important step forward and will provide more important information. However, I would posit that there is already sufficient information about the groundwater quality in the area that the DNR should be ready to immediately act in light of issues. There needs to be a holistic plan for addressing these landscape scale issues. And while Kewaunee County and eastern Wisconsin have more rules and regulations on this front than most in the state, implementation has been painfully slow. Positive results have yet to be seen, and residents continue to struggle with contamination at alarming levels. Crawford Stewardship Project here is based in southwest Wisconsin, and we have over a decade of experience closely monitoring our local CAFO, Roth feeder pig, and studying the sensitive karst hydrogeology of our area. We've closely followed the developments in eastern Wisconsin with hopes that the actions taken there will soon translate to similar protections for our area. We urge that action be taken before we are in a groundwater health crisis like Kewaunee County. But as rule after rule fails to move forward at the state level, the county continues to abdicate responsibility, and our local CAFO is slated to be permitted to expand exponentially. We're quickly losing faith that significant preventative action will be taken in time. Our supporters have lost patience and are desperate for solutions. We hope to be able to work with the DNR and other state agencies to proactively address these issues in a collaborative, inclusive, and science-based manner. So we hope you've appreciated and taken these comments to heart. I think these are important messages from across Wisconsin that need to be heard across the state, and not just with the few regulatory deciders that will be rubber stamping these permits and reviewing these permits. We look forward to putting out more information in the future. You can check out Sustained Rural Wisconsin Network on our website at sustainedruralwisconsin.org. Thank you for listening. Stay engaged, and we'll move forward together on these important issues.